From a restless boy in Queens to one of the most influential and controversial figures in modern history, the life of Donald Trump is a story shaped by ambition, discipline, and unshakable confidence. In this video, we dive deep into his journey, from childhood to business to politics, and uncover the moments that molded the man the world knows today. Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, into a world that was already in motion long before he took his first breath. He arrived in the Jamaica Hospital in Queens, New York City, the fourth of 5 children in a bustling household that never operated quietly or slowly. His father, Fred Trump, was already a highly active and ambitious real estate developer whose companies built middle-class housing across Brooklyn and Queens. His mother, Mary Ann McLeod Trump, was a warm-spirited Scottish immigrant who had crossed the Atlantic at age 18 in search of opportunity. Growing up under these two very different personalities, one sharply disciplined and business-minded, the other gentle and traditional, shaped Donald's earliest behaviors in ways that became deeply woven into his character. The Trump home in the leafy neighborhood of Jamaica Estates was a symbol of upper-middle-class success, large, orderly, and always full of activity. From the outside, it looked like a place where everything functioned perfectly. But on the inside, the atmosphere was defined by competitiveness, work ethic, and an unspoken expectation that each child must stand out. Donald, even as a young boy, refused to blend into the background. Teachers, family friends, and even neighbors remembered him as energetic, bold, restless, and driven by a desire to push limits. His father, Fred, was not the type of parent who spent afternoons reading with the children or playing games in the yard. He was almost always consumed by construction projects, contracts, and meetings. Yet even when he was at home, his presence loomed large. He valued strength, ambition, and discipline, and he admired children who displayed initiative. Donald picked up early that being timid or passive would never earn his father's respect. So he learned to challenge, to speak loudly, to assert himself, not out of rebellion, but out of a genuine desire to become the kind of child Fred would notice. His mother provided a completely different influence. She was elegant, soft-spoken, and deeply tied to her Scottish heritage. She brought a sense of tradition into the home, teaching manners, encouraging religious attendance, and instilling a certain sophistication. Donald admired her warmth and many of the public mannerisms he adopted later in life. The way he greeted people, the courtesy he extended to guests, had roots in her upbringing. As a boy, Donald attended the Q School, a private school in Queens. The school was strict, formal, and academically competitive, but Donald's energy often exceeded the boundaries of the classroom. He was confident, outspoken, and sometimes disruptive, not maliciously, but because he was naturally impatient with routine. He enjoyed sports more than sitting still, and he loved the thrill of competition, whether in athletics or classroom debates. His teachers noticed he had a strong presence, even as a child. When Donald spoke, others listened, and when he entered a room, he seemed to fill it. By the time he reached his early teens, this energetic behavior became more challenging for the school to manage. He wasn't a troublemaker in the traditional sense, but he was rebellious, independent, and uninterested in strict rules. Fred Trump realized that if his son didn't channel his energy properly, he might drift into the wrong influences. So, at the age of 13, Donald's parents enrolled him in the New York Military Academy, NYMA, a place known for structure, discipline, and a regimented lifestyle that demanded respect for authority. This transition marked a dramatic shift in Donald's childhood. From the moment he stepped onto the academy grounds, he was thrown into a world of uniforms, inspections, drills, and a hierarchy that had to be obeyed without question. Many boys resented the harsh discipline, but Donald adapted surprisingly well. The military academy offered something he instinctively craved, a system where performance, confidence, and leadership were rewarded openly. If he excelled, people noticed. If he took charge, others followed. In this environment, Donald learned to wake before dawn, march in formation, keep his living quarters spotless, and adhere to rules that were enforced with precision. At first, he struggled with the strictness, but he soon discovered that the academy was not limiting, it was empowering. It taught him to project authority, command attention, and handle responsibility. He was later promoted to the rank of a leader within the cadet system, a recognition that played directly into his desire to stand out. Outside military drills, he immersed himself in sports. He played baseball and soccer and was especially proud of his performance on the baseball field, where he became known as a strong, confident player. Excelling in athletics gave him a reputation among his peers as someone who not only demanded attention but earned it. Throughout these years, Donald's relationship with his father evolved as well. Fred Trump often visited the academy to check on his son's progress. Unlike other parents, he wasn't looking for perfect grades. He was interested in whether Donald was building toughness, leadership, and discipline. Each visit reinforced Donald's understanding that earning his father's approval wasn't about being gentle or academically exceptional. It was about being bold, strong, and capable of commanding respect. The military school, in a way, became the training ground that shaped the version of Donald Trump the world would later come to know. By the time Donald completed his teenage years at the academy, he had transformed from an energetic boy struggling with boundaries into a young man who understood authority, leadership, and the power of confidence. The lessons of his childhood, the ambition of his father, the refinement of his mother, the competitive nature of his household, and the discipline of military school all converged to create a personality that was unafraid of challenges, attracted to the spotlight, and determined to carve his name into whatever world he entered next. As Donald Trump approached the end of his years at the New York Military Academy, he had already begun shaping the personality that would define him in adulthood: ambitious, competitive, and confident in his ability to rise above any environment he stepped into. Leaving the academy meant stepping out of a world of strict discipline and entering a phase where he had to choose the direction of his future. And for Donald, that direction quickly pointed toward higher education and the family business that had always lingered in the background of his childhood. At first, he enrolled at Fordham University, a Jesuit institution in the Bronx. For 2 years, he navigated college life while living in New York, still close enough to home to feel the pull of his father's world. Fordham exposed him to a broader academic environment, but Donald was not the type to be satisfied with being just another student. He sought prestige, a place where he could align his ambitions with an institution known for producing business leaders. This desire led him to transfer to the Wharton School of Finance and Commerce at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the most respected business schools in the country. Transferring to Wharton was a pivotal decision. The university brought together students from wealthy families, aspiring financiers, future CEOs, and young minds who were ready to shape corporate America. This environment suited Donald perfectly. The competitive atmosphere felt familiar, almost like the hierarchy-driven world of the military academy, but with higher stakes and more refined ambitions. At Wharton, Donald focused heavily on real estate and business management, subjects that not only interested him but were directly connected to the empire his father had been building for decades. During these years, he frequently returned to New York to accompany his father on business visits. Fred Trump often took him to construction sites, meetings with contractors, and negotiations with city officials. Donald absorbed everything: how deals were structured, how buildings rose from the ground, how tenants were managed, and how profit margins were calculated. These were not average father-son outings. These were lessons in empire building, shaping Donald into someone who understood that success wasn't just about money, but about scale, presence, and dominance in the market. Back at Wharton, Donald blended academic learning with real-world experience. He wasn't the kind of student who spent long nights buried in books. Instead, he preferred absorbing knowledge through practical applications, discussions, and hands-on exposure. His professors often noted that he wasn't shy about speaking up in class. He was assertive, decisive, and always ready to challenge an idea that didn't align with his vision of how business should be done. Wharton didn't just educate him, it validated his sense of being destined for something big. While other students prepared for corporate careers or Wall Street jobs, Donald had a different plan forming in his mind. He didn't want to be an employee. He didn't want to climb someone else's ladder. He wanted to return to New York and expand the Trump name beyond the boroughs his father had mastered. By the time he graduated in 1968 with a degree in economics, Donald was already thinking in terms of skyscrapers, Manhattan developments, and projects grand enough to carry the Trump name into the heart of the city. Outside academics, the broader world was shifting dramatically. The Vietnam War was at its peak, and young men across the country were being drafted. Donald, however, received a series of student deferments while he was in college. After graduation, he obtained a medical exemption due to bone spurs in his feet, which made him ineligible for military service. This meant that while many young men were shipped overseas, Donald stepped directly into adulthood with his future open and uninterrupted. Returning home after Wharton, Donald re-entered the world he knew best, real estate, but now with the education, confidence, and strategic mindset to go beyond his father's reach. He was no longer the restless boy from Queens nor the cadet molded by military discipline. He was a young adult fully prepared to step into high-stakes environments, to take risks, and to shape the beginnings of what he believed would one day become a legendary career. His education, both formal and informal, had not just prepared him for adulthood. It had set the foundation for the empire he was about to build. When Donald Trump returned to New York after graduating from Wharton in 1968, he stepped into adulthood with a sharp sense of purpose. Unlike many of his peers who were still figuring out their direction, Donald already had a clear path laid before him, the real estate world built by his father, Fred Trump. But even from the very beginning, he knew he didn't want to simply inherit what his father had created. He wanted to expand it, elevate it, and eventually make the Trump name synonymous with the towering skyline of Manhattan, not just the brick apartment complexes of Queens and Brooklyn. His first years in the family business were a mix of apprenticeship and bold personal ambition. Fred Trump's company was known for its financial discipline, efficient construction, and targeted development of affordable housing. Donald admired his father's work ethic and business instincts, yet he saw an entirely different frontier in real estate, one driven by glamour, luxury, and high-profile visibility. While Fred focused on stable, long-term investments, Donald was drawn to risk, to scale, and to projects that captured public attention. Working closely with his father, Donald began by learning the intricate details of real estate operations. He spent time in rental offices dealing with tenants, studied construction timelines, attended meetings with architects, and observed how deals were negotiated behind closed doors. He learned how to read financial statements, how to navigate city regulations, and how to approach banks for financing. But beyond the technical knowledge, he was studying the art of persuasion, how to present a vision, how to project confidence, and how to win people over through force of personality. Despite this grounding, Donald wasn't content with managing outer borough housing. Manhattan, with its towering skyscrapers, bustling business districts, and seductive prestige, called to him. At the time, Manhattan's real estate environment was extremely challenging. The city was facing financial difficulty, crime rates were high, and luxury development seemed risky. But for Donald, this wasn't a deterrent. It was an opportunity. He understood that if he could succeed in Manhattan during tough times, he could establish himself as a force in the world's most competitive real estate market. One of his earliest breakthroughs came when he set his eyes on the aging Commodore Hotel, located next to Grand Central Terminal. The building was deteriorating, losing money, and had a reputation for being outdated. Many developers saw it as a liability, but Donald saw potential, a bold vision of transforming it into a gleaming luxury hotel that would symbolize New York's revival. It was an audacious idea for a young man in his 20s, but Donald pushed forward with relentless determination. To bring the project to life, he needed partners, financing, and political approval. This required a different kind of skill, not simply understanding construction, but navigating high-level negotiations. Donald approached the Hyatt hotel chain, convincing them that the location could flourish with the right investment. He also met with city officials and worked out one of the most significant tax abatement deals in New York City history at the time. This move not only made the renovation financially feasible but also demonstrated that Donald could execute deals that older, more experienced developers hesitated to attempt. In 1980, after years of planning, negotiations, and construction, the once-failing Commodore Hotel reopened as the Grand Hyatt Hotel, modern, bright, and celebrated as a symbol of transformation. The project was a turning point for Donald. It validated his vision, introduced him to Manhattan's power circles, and marked his transition from Fred Trump's son to a rising real estate star in his own right. With the Grand Hyatt complete, Donald's ambitions grew even larger. His next major endeavor would become one of his most iconic achievements, the construction of Trump Tower. He selected a location on Fifth Avenue, one of the most prestigious streets in the world, and envisioned not just another building, but a luxurious skyscraper that would stand as a monument to wealth and modern design. Trump Tower would feature a marble-covered atrium, high-end retail stores, and lavish residential units, all under the Trump brand. The project was bold, expensive, and complicated, but Donald immersed himself completely in the details, from the architecture to the marketing strategy. When Trump Tower finally opened in 1983, it wasn't simply a building. It was a statement. Celebrities, wealthy New Yorkers, and international buyers flocked to it, drawn by its exclusivity and the aura Donald cultivated around the Trump name. The success of Trump Tower solidified his presence in Manhattan and set the tone for the image he would carry for decades. A man associated with luxury, scale, and spectacle. With his reputation rising, Donald expanded into new ventures throughout the 1980s. He acquired casinos in Atlantic City, purchased the Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, developed high-rise buildings, and even launched Trump Shuttle, an airline that operated shuttles along the East Coast. He wasn't just a developer anymore. He was a brand, a personality, and a figure constantly in the media spotlight. These early business years laid the foundation for everything that followed. They showcased Donald Trump's signature approach: bold risks, aggressive deals, meticulous attention to publicity, and the belief that success was not simply measured in profits, but in visibility and influence. It was during this era that Donald Trump became more than a businessman. He became a public figure whose name alone carried power. As Donald Trump's business ambitions continued to expand through the 1970s and early 1980s, his personal life unfolded with just as much visibility, complexity, and public fascination. Long before he became a political figure, Trump had already developed a reputation as a man whose private world, his relationships, marriages, and family, was never far from the spotlight. His personal story became intertwined with the image he carefully crafted: wealthy, glamorous, and larger than life. Donald Trump's first major relationship began in the early 1970s when he met Ivana Zelníčková, a Czech-born model and former ski athlete. Their romance grew quickly, fueled by the kind of high-society energy that dominated New York's elite circles at the time. Ivana brought her own ambition, discipline, and charisma, traits that blended seamlessly with Trump's drive for success and public visibility. The two married in 1977 in a highly celebrated ceremony that created what many described as a power couple in Manhattan. During their marriage, Ivana became deeply involved in Trump's growing real estate empire. She took leadership roles in major Trump Organization projects, including interior design work for the Trump Tower and later managing the Plaza Hotel. Trump admired her discipline and work ethic, often praising her publicly, and for a time, the couple projected an image of unity, success, and glamour. Their marriage produced 3 children: Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, each of whom grew up surrounded by their parents' empire and the media attention that followed them everywhere. But by the late 1980s, cracks began to appear in the marriage. Trump's rising fame, frequent travel, and increasingly public lifestyle placed stress on the relationship. The real breaking point became a highly publicized extramarital affair involving Georgia-born actress Marla Maples, which turned their private conflict into front-page news. The story dominated tabloids and gossip columns, eventually leading to the couple's separation and a widely covered divorce finalized in 1992. Their split marked one of the most talked-about divorces of the decade and reinforced Trump's position as a public figure whose personal life could not escape scrutiny. Following the divorce, Trump began a more open relationship with Marla Maples. Their connection, initially surrounded by controversy, evolved into a genuine partnership, and in 1993, they married. That same year, they welcomed their daughter, Tiffany Trump. But despite moments of closeness, Trump's second marriage proved less stable than the first. Trump was deeply focused on rebuilding his business empire after facing major financial downturns in the early 1990s. While Maples struggled with the pressures of fame and the expectations attached to being married to Trump. After a few years, the couple drifted apart, and in 1999 they finalized their divorce, maintaining mostly cordial terms and co-parenting Tiffany from a distance. By the late 1990s, as Trump regained financial strength and returned to public prominence, he met Melania Naus, a model from Slovenia who had moved to the U.S. in pursuit of her career. Their relationship began quietly compared to his previous marriages, but over time Melania became a steady and reserved presence in Trump's life. Her calm, private nature contrasted with Trump's bold personality, and the pair seemed to balance each other in subtle ways. They married in 2005 in a lavish ceremony attended by business magnates, politicians, and celebrities, an event that further cemented Trump's fascination with grand spectacle and elite circles. In 2006, they welcomed their son, Baron William Trump, who became the fifth and youngest of Trump's children. Melania embraced motherhood while maintaining a low public profile, even as Trump's fame grew through ventures like The Apprentice and later his political rise. As Trump moved toward national politics, Melania remained supportive but selective in her public appearances, shaping an image of independence and quiet strength. Throughout his life, Trump's personal relationships, complex, dramatic, and often deeply human, played a significant role in shaping his identity. His marriages reflected different eras of his life. The ambitious and fast-rising mogul with Ivana, the turbulent and media-driven chapter with Marla, and the more measured and settled period with Melania. His children, each raised in different phases of his journey, would go on to play major roles in his professional and political path. Trump's personal life has always been inseparable from the public narrative surrounding him. His relationships, high-profile divorces, and growing family not only influenced how the world viewed him but also shaped the man he became, emotionally, socially, and even politically. And as his life moved forward toward the next stages, the strength of these personal connections continued to influence his decisions and the legacy he would ultimately build. As Donald Trump stabilized his business empire in the mid-1990s and moved past the financial turbulence that had nearly swallowed his fortune, he began reshaping himself in a completely new way, no longer just a real estate developer but a full-blown public personality. This shift did not happen overnight. Instead, it unfolded gradually as Trump learned how to harness media attention, celebrity culture, and public fascination to turn his name into a brand that would grow far beyond the towers and hotels he built. It was during this period that the Trump identity transformed from a family business into a worldwide symbol. Even before The Apprentice made him a household television figure, Trump had already tasted fame. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, he had mastered the art of public visibility. He appeared at red carpet events, charity galas, boxing matches, and fashion shows. He granted interviews to magazines, newspapers, talk shows, and entertainment programs. Trump understood better than most businessmen of his era that public attention was a currency, and the more he controlled it, the more influence he could command. Whether people admired him or criticized him, he remained at the center of the conversation, which only strengthened his identity as a bold, unapologetic figure of wealth and ambition. Trump also realized the power of his name as a marketing tool. By the mid-1990s, he began licensing the Trump brand on a wide range of products: clothing, fragrances, home furnishings, bottled water, even steaks. He was no longer selling just buildings, he was selling an image, a lifestyle, and a persona. To millions of people who would never step foot inside Trump Tower, the Trump name represented something aspirational: success, luxury, confidence, and a sense of having made it. The fact that not all of these ventures succeeded financially did not matter nearly as much as the public visibility they generated. Every product that carried his name kept Trump in the public eye and fed the narrative of a man who lived on a level untouched by ordinary life. But the true explosion of his celebrity came with the creation of The Apprentice in 2004. The reality television show was built around Trump's personality, his authority, his business instincts, and his larger-than-life presence. Millions tuned in each week to watch aspiring entrepreneurs compete for a chance to work with him. The boardroom scenes, the intense challenges, and Trump's dramatic catchphrase, "You're fired," turned him into a cultural phenomenon. For many viewers, this was their first deep exposure to Donald Trump, and the show crafted a very specific image: a powerful, decisive, and impeccably successful business titan who made high-stakes decisions with ease. The success of The Apprentice reinforced the Trump brand at every level. It boosted the value of his real estate properties, increased sales of his branded products, and expanded his public influence beyond business and entertainment. People around the world, from New York to Dubai, began to associate the Trump name with success, even if they knew little about his actual financial struggles or the complexities of his business operations. The television persona became more influential than the business reality, shaping how millions perceived him. Trump capitalized on this attention with skill. He kept his media appearances frequent, lively, and often provocative. Whether he was discussing politics, business, or celebrity gossip, he rarely missed an opportunity to express strong opinions. He became a staple on talk shows and news panels, and his interviews were almost always memorable. Sometimes controversial, sometimes humorous, but never forgettable. This unpredictability made him a media magnet. By the 2010s, social media unlocked a new dimension of Trump's public identity. Platforms like Twitter gave him direct access to millions of people without any filter from journalists or television producers. His posts were blunt, emotional, and often combative, but they kept him constantly trending and ensured that his voice dominated conversations across the political and entertainment worlds. Whether praised or criticized, Trump remained at the center of national attention, exactly where he seemed most comfortable. This rise to celebrity status transformed Donald Trump into something rare, a businessman who had become not just a brand, but a cultural character, instantly recognizable, endlessly discussed, and deeply polarizing. His media presence blurred the line between entertainment, business, and public life, creating a foundation that would later propel him into an entirely new arena he had long flirted with: national politics. By the time Donald Trump had cemented himself as a global celebrity and a symbol of American wealth, his interest in politics, something that had quietly simmered in the background for decades, began to move steadily into the foreground of his public life. Trump had always been fascinated by political power, leadership, and the workings of government. Even as far back as the 1980s, he had voiced strong opinions on national issues, ranging from America's trade relationships to crime rates in major cities. But during those early years, his political involvement came mostly in the form of interviews, commentary, and occasional speculation about whether he might one day run for office. It was more of a curiosity than a concrete ambition. That curiosity, however, started taking a more definite shape in the late 1980s and early 1990s when Trump became vocal about what he saw as weaknesses in America's economic policies. He criticized the country's trade agreements, insisting that foreign nations, particularly Japan at that time, were taking advantage of the United States. He gave interviews, wrote op-eds, and even testified before Congress about economic issues. These early public interventions revealed a Donald Trump who was not just a businessman but a man who believed his understanding of negotiation and national strength could translate into political leadership. In 2000, Trump took a significant step toward political involvement when he briefly explored a presidential run under the Reform Party. Although the campaign was short-lived and lacked the structure of a full political operation, it revealed something important. Trump enjoyed the political stage. He enjoyed the rallies, the debates, the media attention, and the sense of influence that came with national politics. Yet he eventually stepped back, choosing to return to business and entertainment. For the moment, he allowed his political ambitions to rest, but they never truly disappeared. As the 2000s progressed, Trump became increasingly outspoken on issues of national importance. He criticized America's involvement in foreign wars, expressed alarm about the state of the economy, and attacked political leaders whom he believed were weak or ineffective. His views were often controversial, but they resonated with a growing portion of Americans who felt disconnected from traditional politicians. Trump's appearances on talk shows, radio programs, and later social media amplified his voice, slowly building an audience that saw him as a fierce outsider, someone unafraid to challenge the political establishment. A turning point came during Barack Obama's presidency. Trump became a central figure in several political debates, especially those involving the economy and national security. His commentary, sometimes provocative, sometimes blunt, and always direct, kept him in the political spotlight. Whether people agreed with him or not, his presence became unavoidable. By the early 2010s, he was no longer just offering opinions, he was shaping political conversations. At the same time, his fame from The Apprentice gave him a unique platform. Millions of Americans watched him weekly, seeing him as a decisive leader who demanded performance and rewarded competence. This image blended with his political commentary, creating the foundation for something rarely seen in American politics. A celebrity figure who could cross over into political credibility with an enormous built-in audience. Trump's increasing political involvement reached its peak in 2015 when he made the long-rumored decision official. Standing in the lobby of Trump Tower, he announced his candidacy for President of the United States. It was a moment that shocked political experts, journalists, and members of both parties. Many dismissed his campaign as symbolic or purely for publicity, but Trump had no intention of running a symbolic race. He launched a full-scale, aggressive, and unconventional campaign that immediately changed the tone of American politics. His entry into the race marked a new chapter not only in his life but in the country's political landscape. He campaigned on issues he had been vocal about for decades: economic nationalism, immigration reform, trade renegotiation, and a promise to restore what he described as American greatness. His rallies drew huge crowds, his speeches dominated news cycles, and his use of social media bypassed traditional campaign strategies entirely. For the first time, Donald Trump was not just commenting on politics, he was fully immersed in it. What began as an exploration evolved into a movement, and what started as curiosity became a serious, forceful bid for the nation's highest office. Trump's political awakening, shaped by decades of public commentary and deep personal conviction, ultimately positioned him not as a commentator or entertainer, but as a major political figure on the world stage. His entry into politics marked the beginning of one of the most dramatic and consequential chapters of his life, and one that would soon redefine modern American history. When Donald Trump stepped onto the political stage in 2015 and announced his candidacy for president, few could have predicted how profoundly he would reshape the American political landscape. His campaign began with a simplicity and boldness that immediately set him apart. Without relying on carefully crafted political speeches or traditional messaging, Trump spoke in a raw, direct style that resonated deeply with millions of Americans who felt unheard, overlooked, or frustrated with the status quo. From the very beginning, his campaign broke almost every political rule, and yet, each step seemed to strengthen his movement rather than weaken it. Trump's early rallies gave the first signs that his candidacy was more than a symbolic gesture. Crowds grew rapidly in size and energy, drawing people from far beyond the Republican Party's traditional base. His message, focused on economic revival, strict immigration enforcement, renegotiated trade deals, and a promise to put America first, tapped into a mix of patriotism, frustration, and desire for dramatic change. As he spoke, many Americans felt he was saying what other politicians were afraid to say. His critiques of political elites, the media, and long-standing government institutions attracted supporters who believed the country needed an outsider with a strong hand and an unapologetic voice. Inside the Republican Party, Trump's rise was initially met with skepticism and even resistance. Many established figures underestimated his appeal, assuming his campaign would fade once the novelty wore off. Instead, Trump surged in the polls, outperforming experienced politicians in debate after debate. His willingness to challenge rivals directly, dismiss political correctness, and frame issues in absolute terms made him a constant headline, and ensured he stayed at the center of national attention. As the primary season unfolded, Trump's momentum only increased. He won crucial early states like New Hampshire and South Carolina, proving that his support was not limited to one region or demographic. He spoke to working-class voters who felt left behind by globalization, to conservatives frustrated with years of broken promises, and to independents drawn to his outsider persona. By May 2016, one Republican candidate after another had dropped out, leaving Trump as the presumptive nominee, a result that stunned political analysts around the world. Trump formally accepted the Republican nomination at the party's national convention, delivering a speech that cast the 2016 election as a turning point in American history. He promised safety, prosperity, and national renewal, framing himself as the leader who could restore strength at home and abroad. The contrast between Trump and his Democratic opponent, Hillary Clinton, became the defining theme of the general election. Outsider versus insider, disruption versus stability, raw energy versus traditional politics. The general election campaign was one of the most heated, dramatic, and divisive in modern American history. Trump held massive rallies across battleground states, sometimes drawing tens of thousands of supporters. He used social media, particularly Twitter, to communicate directly with millions of followers, bypassing conventional media filters. His messaging was unfiltered, fast-moving, and often controversial, but it kept him constantly in the public eye. Meanwhile, Clinton ran a traditional, well-funded campaign with experienced political strategists, high-profile endorsements, and extensive infrastructure. Most polls projected her as the likely winner, and many experts believed Trump's unconventional approach would reach its limit during the general election. But beneath the surface, the race was shifting in ways that were not immediately visible in polling data. Trump had tapped into a deep well of dissatisfaction, particularly in key industrial states that had long voted Democratic but were experiencing economic decline and cultural transformation. In the final weeks of the campaign, Trump intensified his message, focusing heavily on jobs, trade, immigration, and what he described as the failures of the political establishment. His rallies became emotional gatherings where supporters expressed their desire for dramatic change and renewed pride in the country. Trump traveled relentlessly across swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, and Ohio, speaking at multiple events per day and refusing to slow down. Election Day, November 8, 2016, would become one of the most surprising nights in American political history. As results came in, the early expectations began to crumble. Florida swung toward Trump, followed by North Carolina. Then Ohio delivered him a decisive win. The map began to shift in ways few analysts had anticipated. The turning point came when states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, long considered Democratic strongholds, moved into Trump's column. In the early hours of the morning, it became clear Donald J. Trump had secured enough electoral votes to become the 45th president of the United States. His victory sent shockwaves around the world. Many celebrated it as a triumph for outsiders, a rebuke of political elites, and a statement about the power of populist movements. Others were stunned, anxious, or deeply divided about what the result meant for the country. But regardless of perspective, one truth was undeniable. Trump had achieved one of the most unexpected political victories in modern history. For Trump, it was the culmination of a journey that began decades earlier with commentary, frustration, and a belief that America needed a different kind of leadership. His 2016 victory transformed him from a businessman and television figure into the most powerful political leader in the world, marking the beginning of a presidency that would reshape the national landscape in ways that are still felt today. Donald Trump's presidency began with a level of intensity and public attention rarely seen in modern American history. From the moment he took the oath of office on January 20, 2017, it was clear that his leadership style would break sharply from tradition. Trump entered the White House not as a typical politician but as an outsider determined to fulfill the promises he made during his campaign. His presidency became a defining period marked by major policy changes, constant media battles, strong supporter loyalty, and equally strong opposition. Few leaders in recent memory commanded as much passion, debate, and global interest. One of Trump's early priorities was reshaping the American economy. He moved swiftly to cut regulations that he believed were restricting business growth, arguing that unleashing private enterprise would create jobs and raise wages. His administration rolled back environmental restrictions, streamlined permitting processes for energy projects, and reduced federal rules across many sectors. Supporters credited these moves for spurring business confidence and energizing the stock market. In 2017, he signed a sweeping tax reform bill that lowered corporate tax rates and adjusted individual tax brackets, delivering one of the most significant economic overhauls in decades. Under his leadership, unemployment reached historically low levels, including record lows among African American, Hispanic, and Asian American workers. For many Americans, especially those involved in business or middle-income professions. These years felt economically optimistic. Yet Trump's economic approach also sparked criticism. Opponents argued that the tax cuts disproportionately benefited the wealthy and increased the national deficit. Environmental groups and some state governments pushed back against deregulation, warning that long-term environmental consequences could outweigh short-term economic gains. But Trump's philosophy remained consistent, a belief that a strong, deregulated market and lower taxes would strengthen America's position domestically and globally. Immigration became another defining area of Trump's presidency. He pushed for strict border control, emphasizing national security and the need to protect American jobs. His administration increased border enforcement, sought to build additional sections of the border wall, and implemented policies aimed at discouraging illegal immigration. Supporters viewed these actions as necessary steps to secure the country and uphold the rule of law. Critics, however, described the policies as harsh and, in some cases, inhumane. The debates around immigration grew deeply emotional, shaping national conversations and fueling political divisions. On the global stage, Trump approached foreign policy with a businessman's mindset, direct, unpredictable, and focused on redefining America's relationships. He renegotiated trade agreements, withdrew the U.S. from deals he viewed as unfavorable, and applied tariffs on countries like China to pressure them into more balanced economic terms. His administration also brokered the Abraham Accords, a series of normalization agreements between Israel and several Arab nations, which many viewed as a significant diplomatic achievement. Trump met directly with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, aiming to reduce nuclear tensions, a bold and unprecedented move that drew both praise and skepticism. Domestically, Trump reshaped the American judiciary. Working with the Republican-led Senate, he appointed hundreds of federal judges, including 3 Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. These appointments shifted the ideological balance of the court and cemented a conservative judicial legacy that would influence American law for decades. But Trump's presidency was also marked by intense controversy. He faced continuous media scrutiny, political resistance, and deep public polarization. His communication style, particularly his frequent and unfiltered use of social media, kept him constantly at the center of national debate. Supporters saw his bluntness as authenticity. Detractors saw it as divisive and destabilizing. One of the most significant tests of his presidency came during the COVID-19 pandemic. The global crisis brought unprecedented challenges, from public health emergencies to economic shutdowns. Trump's response became a major point of national contention. His administration oversaw Operation Warp Speed, which accelerated the development of COVID-19 vaccines at a pace previously thought impossible, an effort widely recognized as a major achievement. Yet the broader handling of the pandemic drew mixed reactions, with debates over mask mandates, lockdowns, and communication strategies fueling political tensions across the country. Trump's presidency faced additional upheaval through 2 impeachment proceedings, an extraordinary historical event, as he became the first U.S. president to be impeached twice. In both cases, he was acquitted by the Senate, but the episodes deepened the nation's political divide and intensified the scrutiny around his leadership. Despite the controversies, Trump maintained a fiercely loyal base of supporters who admired his refusal to bow to political pressure, his focus on American strength, and his willingness to challenge long-standing institutions. Many felt he delivered on his promises and changed the direction of the country in a way no traditional politician could. As Trump's presidency came to an end in January 2021, the nation was more polarized than ever, but his impact was undeniable. He had reshaped the Republican Party, redrawn lines of political allegiance, and ignited a populist movement that continued long after he left office. His achievements, his controversies, and the challenges he navigated made his presidency one of the most consequential and debated periods in 21st century American history. Trump's years in the White House did not close the chapter on his political influence. They only elevated it. His supporters remained energized, his critics remained vocal, and the world continued to watch what he might do next. His presidency, with all its triumphs and turmoil, became a central part of his identity and a key turning point in the story of his life. After leaving the White House in January 2021, Donald Trump transitioned from the nation's most powerful executive to one of its most influential former leaders. Though he no longer held the office of president, he remained a dominant figure in American politics, media, and public discourse. His post-presidency years have been marked by a combination of political influence, legal challenges, media presence, and preparation for a potential return to national leadership, a period that illustrates both his resilience and the polarizing nature of his persona. Almost immediately after leaving office, Trump focused on consolidating his influence within the Republican Party. Despite losing the 2020 election, his base remained fiercely loyal, viewing him as the figurehead of a movement that emphasized populism, nationalism, and the promise of America First policies. He held rallies, endorsed candidates in midterm elections, and leveraged his substantial social media following to shape the Republican agenda. His influence was so pronounced that many Republican politicians considered his support crucial for electoral success, effectively making him the central figure in the party's strategic calculations. Trump's post-presidency years, however, were also dominated by legal challenges that varied in complexity and significance. Investigations at the state and federal levels scrutinized his business practices, financial transactions, and actions taken during his presidency. These legal battles generated intense media coverage and public debate, further solidifying his position as a polarizing figure. While critics viewed these challenges as evidence of wrongdoing, his supporters often portrayed them as politically motivated attacks designed to diminish his power. Trump approached these situations strategically, framing them as part of a broader narrative of resistance against establishment forces, which resonated with his core followers. In parallel with navigating legal scrutiny, Trump carefully nurtured his public image and media presence. He remained active in rallies, interviews, and speeches, often positioning himself as the voice of disaffected Americans and the arbiter of Republican policy. He emphasized the accomplishments of his presidency, criticized the current administration, and portrayed himself as the central figure in defending traditional values and economic nationalism. His ability to command attention without holding office demonstrated a level of political influence rarely seen among former U.S. presidents. Amid this ongoing engagement, speculation about his political future became a focal point of national conversation. In 2022, Trump officially launched preparations for another presidential campaign, setting the stage for a potential 2024 bid. His messaging echoed many themes from 2016 and 2020. Promises to restore American strength, focus on border security, revitalize the economy, and challenge what he described as a failing political establishment. Supporters interpreted this as a continuation of the movement he had built over decades, while opponents expressed concern over his influence on the political process and the divisions it had created in the country. Trump's post-presidency has also been characterized by a keen understanding of media and branding. He leveraged new platforms and alliances to maintain a presence in the public eye, often ensuring that his statements, events, and endorsements dominated news cycles. This strategic media engagement allowed him to shape political narratives and remain a central figure in American life, even outside the formal powers of the presidency. It reinforced a perception that for Donald Trump, influence was not confined to office but extended across culture, politics, and society at large. At the same time, his post-presidency has been marked by careful cultivation of his personal and familial legacy. His children, many of whom had played roles in his business and political operations, continued to occupy prominent positions in public life. Trump frequently highlighted his achievements, his supporters, and the continuation of his vision for America, keeping his narrative alive in a way that blended both politics and personal branding. His influence extends beyond policy into the shaping of political culture and public perception, a phenomenon few former presidents experience. As the 2024 campaign approached, Trump's post-presidency increasingly resembled an active prelude to another attempt at the presidency. His rallies grew larger, his speeches more pointed, and his messaging focused squarely on reclaiming leadership in a country he argued was facing critical challenges. The combination of enduring popularity among his base, ongoing media coverage, and persistent influence in Republican politics positioned him as a central figure in shaping the nation's future. Donald Trump's post-presidency, therefore, is not a quiet chapter but an active, ongoing story of power, controversy, and political strategy. It is a period that demonstrates how influence can extend far beyond the office of the presidency, how a public figure can remain central to national debate, and how ambition, personality, and a loyal following can sustain prominence for decades. The legacy of these years will be inseparable from his entire life story, a narrative defined by bold risk-taking, relentless self-promotion, and an unshakable belief in his ability to command attention, authority, and loyalty, qualities that continue to shape both his personal journey and the trajectory of the nation. Donald Trump's life, from his childhood in Queens to his position as a global figure in politics and business, is a story of ambition, resilience, and relentless self-reinvention. As of today, he remains one of the most recognized and controversial figures in the world, his legacy both celebrated and contested, his influence extending far beyond the limits of any single office or achievement. Looking at his life as a whole, it becomes clear that Trump's journey is defined not only by his successes but by the way he transformed himself into a symbol of power, celebrity, and political disruption. In business, Trump's legacy is unmistakable. He transformed the family real estate enterprise into a global brand recognized for luxury, scale, and spectacle. From Trump Tower in Manhattan to high-profile developments and properties worldwide, his name became synonymous with wealth and ambition. Beyond his buildings, his branding extended into hotels, golf courses, consumer products, and television, demonstrating a keen understanding that influence could be as valuable as physical assets. Even when some ventures failed, his ability to generate attention, command markets, and maintain a public persona established him as a business figure unlike any other. In politics, Trump's impact is equally profound. His 2016 election victory reshaped the Republican Party and influenced national discourse on immigration, trade, foreign policy, and the role of media in politics. He proved that outsider status, celebrity, and direct communication could galvanize a massive base of supporters and challenge decades of political norms. The controversies, criticisms, and challenges he faced only reinforced the narrative of a figure who operates outside conventional boundaries, one willing to confront institutions, opponents, and the press with unflinching confidence. Whether admired or opposed, Trump fundamentally changed expectations of what a political campaign could look like, how influence could be wielded, and how a leader's personal brand could become inseparable from national policy. Trump's post-presidency continues to amplify his legacy. He has remained a central figure in the Republican Party, shaping its priorities, endorsing candidates, and mobilizing supporters nationwide. His ongoing legal battles, public commentary, and 2024 campaign efforts ensure that his voice remains central in political discussions, sustaining his influence on both policy debates and cultural conversations. For his supporters, he is a champion of outsider politics, economic strength, and national pride. For critics, he remains a polarizing figure whose methods and rhetoric challenge traditional democratic norms. Regardless of perspective, his presence dominates the public sphere. Beyond politics and business, Trump's life has also had a profound influence on media, culture, and the very nature of public attention. He demonstrated how personality, media strategy, and branding could elevate an individual to global prominence. From his early real estate ventures to his television career, political campaigns, and continued public visibility, Trump has mastered the interplay between attention, perception, and authority. He has shown that influence is not only about office or wealth but about presence, narrative control, and the ability to captivate audiences worldwide. His personal legacy, intertwined with his public persona, is reflected in his family. His children, Donald Jr., Ivanka, Eric, Tiffany, and Barron, remain visible in business, media, and political activities, ensuring that the Trump name continues to carry weight across generations. The family's engagement in his business, media, and political projects further extends his influence and embeds his approach to leadership, ambition, and branding into a lasting familial narrative. In assessing Donald Trump's life up to date, one sees a figure defined by contradictions, complexities, and unyielding ambition. He is a man who embodies both achievement and controversy, whose life story challenges simple categorizations. Yet the unifying thread throughout his decades-long journey is a relentless pursuit of visibility, power, and impact. From Queens to Manhattan, from real estate to the presidency, from media to politics, Trump has left an indelible mark on American society and the global stage. His legacy is a reflection of a life lived loudly, boldly, and unapologetically, demonstrating that influence, reputation, and ambition can shape history in ways that extend far beyond conventional measures of success. Whether history will ultimately view him as a transformative leader, a polarizing disruptor, or a complex combination of both remains to be seen. What is undeniable, however, is that Donald Trump's life story is far from over. Even today, he continues to shape conversations, policy debates, political movements, and cultural narratives, proving that the man who once sought fame and influence in the world of real estate has become a figure whose impact endures, dynamic and ongoing, up to the present day. Thank you for watching the full story of Donald Trump's life, from his childhood in Queens to his ongoing influence on business, politics, and culture. His journey is a remarkable mix of ambition, controversy, and resilience, proof that one life can leave a lasting mark on the world. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more detailed life stories and insights like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.